So today, we're going to dive into a really cool idea. That law isn't some fixed, eternal thing handed down from on high. No, instead, it's actually a reflection of us, of our society, our economy, and yeah, even our anxieties. And to kick things off, let's look at a surprisingly personal example of how this all works.
I mean, really think about it. You're head over heels in love, planning a future together, and then, bam, you have to sit down and negotiate a business contract about what happens if it all falls apart. It's this incredibly awkward clash, right? The romance you feel in your heart versus the cold, hard logic of a legal document. Well, this very personal dilemma, it's a perfect window into a much, much bigger shift happening in our world.
You know, the writer David Brooks pointed out a really similar tension with online dating. You're there, scrolling through profiles, weighing pros and cons, rationally calculating someone's stats, all in this poetic quest to find love. This friction between calculation and emotion, it's not just in our love lives. It's one of the defining features of the modern world. And the sociologist Max Weber actually had a name for this whole process: rationalization. His big idea was that as society modernized, pure logic and reason started to seep into every corner of our lives, from the way we work to, even the way we love. And crucially for us, this process completely reshaped our laws.
But here's the thing. This idea that law is flexible and man-made, it runs completely counter to a much older and maybe more powerful belief that true law doesn't change at all.
For centuries, you had thinkers from Plato and Aristotle all the way to St. Thomas Aquinas pushing this idea of natural law. And the basic concept is that real law is, God-given or just part of the natural order of the universe. It's universal and unchanging, kind of like the law of gravity. It just is, and we're just here to discover it.
And that brings us to the core conflict we're talking about today. On one side, you've got this traditional view of law as something transcendent and universal. But on the other side, you have the socio-legal view we're exploring, that law is a human-made product, something that's constantly evolving and changing right alongside the society it governs.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little deeper. Let's start with this idea that our legal and social worlds are basically cut from the same cloth.
One of the first thinkers to really wrestle with this was a guy named Maine. He argued that ancient societies were all about your status, your family, your clan, your social class. The law treated you as part of a group. But in modern society, he said, the individual became the main event. And so the law shifted its focus to contracts, to the free and voluntary agreements made between all us individuals.
Now, that's a pretty optimistic theory, right? But does it really hold up? I mean, if we've truly moved beyond status, then why do legal outcomes today so often seem to depend on exactly who you are?
And this is where Maine's clean idea starts to get messy. We see things like kids, often from minority backgrounds, getting arrested in their classrooms for basically just acting like kids. Meanwhile, the Wall Street leaders who nearly tanked the entire global economy, they faced almost no legal consequences. This all suggests that status, or something that looks a whole lot like it, still matters a lot.
Another giant thinker, Émile Durkheim, had a different take. He said pre-modern societies had what he called mechanical solidarity. Basically, everyone was pretty similar, they did the same kind of work, and they shared a strong moral code, a collective conscience. So law was repressive. It was all about harsh punishment to reinforce those shared values. But in modern societies, we have organic solidarity. We're all different, specialized, but we depend on each other. So law becomes restitutive. It's less about punishment and more about restoring social balance, like making sure people pay their taxes or honor a contract.
Then you've got the materialist perspective, which is most famously tied to Karl Marx. For these thinkers, it really all boils down to the economy. The legal system, they'd argue, eventually gets bent into whatever shape best serves the dominant economic structure. And for us, that's capitalism.
The philosopher Jeffrey Riemann came up with this really powerful analogy to make the point. Just imagine a society where all the oxygen is owned by a handful of people. To breathe, you have to work for them on their terms. Now, we look at an employment contract and call it a free choice. But if you have to work for someone to survive, to get the oxygen, is it really a choice, or is it just a form of coercion? From this point of view, capitalist law is there to make that coercion look normal and fair.
And this brings us to a really fundamental question. Our law tends to define unsafe working conditions as a risk that a worker agrees to take. But if you look at it from another angle, couldn't you call it a violent crime committed by the employer? It shows how our legal framework is, as some say, read off the face of capitalism, shaping what we even see as a harm in the first place.
Okay, so these historical theories are great for context. But what about right now? How does this connect to our world today?
Well, that brings us to what some call the modern culture of control.
The philosopher Michel Foucault gave us this powerful metaphor, the panopticon. It's a design for a circular prison where a single guard in a central tower can see into any cell at any time, but the prisoners never know if they're actually being watched at that moment. And Foucault argued that modern society works just like this. It's the possibility of constant surveillance that makes us discipline ourselves.
And just look around. We see this everywhere today, right? From CCTV cameras on every street corner, to GPS in our cars, to the mass collection of our data by agencies like the NSA. We are living inside a giant technological panopticon. And the goal isn't always to catch you in the act, but to create an environment where you just automatically regulate your own behavior.
Building on these ideas, the sociologist David Garland argues that all the anxieties of what he calls late modernity, things like economic uncertainty, fear of crime, have given rise to a widespread culture of control. Our legal and social policies have become absolutely obsessed with managing danger and containing risk.
And this leads to a huge shift in focus. The system isn't just about punishing a crime after it's already happened. Now, it's about proactively managing entire groups of people who are seen as risky, and those groups are often the poor and people of color.
Here's a jaw-dropping example of this in action. In a single year, the small city of Ferguson, Missouri, which had a population of just 21,000 people, issued 25,000 arrest warrants. Most of them were for minor poverty violations, like unpaid traffic tickets. That's not about justice. That's about using the legal system as a tool for managing a population, and frankly, generating revenue.
Okay, so we've looked at all these different theories, from status and contracts to punishment and control. So after all that, what can we actually say law is?
Well, the biggest takeaway is this. Law is not like gravity. It is not some transcendent, unchanging set of rules sent down from the heavens. It's a deeply human product. It's molded and shaped by our economy, our social structures, our technology, and even our deepest fears. As we change, it changes.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty big question to think about. If law really is a mirror that reflects our society, what does it say about us when we look at our reflection right now? What does our current legal system, with all its surveillances, its inequalities, its focus on control, tell us about who we are today?